This is the location of the former home of Paul von Hindenburg, hero of the First World War, but also the person who appointed Adolf Hitler to becoming Chancellor. In this video, I shall look at the home of Paul von Hindenburg at Neudeck, which, like Obersalzburg under Hitler, was at times the second capital of Germany. That is, of course, if we accept that the capital is where government decisions were made. The Neudeck estate had been in the possession of the Hindenburg family since 1755. The founder of the Hindenburg estates was Colonel Otto Friedrich von Hindenburg, who died on the 10th of January 1765. As he was childless, the estate of Otto Friedrich von Hindenburg was inherited by his sisters Sophie and Barbara. After Barbara's death in 1778, Neudeck passed to her grandson Otto Gottfried von Benkendorf, the great-grandfather of the later President of the Reich, but on the condition that the heir also take on the name and coat of arms of the von Hindenburg family. This was approved by King Frederick William II on the 2nd of January 1789, and from then on the members of the family bore the double name of von Benkendorf und von Hindenburg. Around this time, Otto Gottfried built the old manor house of Neudeck, a two-story building with 6 mansards on the upper floor. Even though this map does not show Neudeck, you can see the location of the nearby town of Freistadt, which is today Kyselica in Poland. There was a significant Polish-speaking population in the southern part of East Prussia, and what became East Prussia, once part of West Prussia, was ceded to Poland. I refer to Neudeck being in East Prussia as that was the case after the territorial changes which led to the creation of Poland. However, Neudeck was in West Prussia until those changes came about. Due to the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles, the population in the Marienwerder plebiscite area, to which Neudeck belonged, voted on the 11th of July 1920 on whether to remain part of Germany or join Poland. Indeed, the choice was East Prussia or Poland. In Neudeck, 139 residents voted to remain part of Germany. No votes were cast for Poland. I meant to do a video on the East Prussian plebiscite for the centenary in July 2020. I still haven't done it, but maybe I'll do it for the bicentenary. Even though Neudeck had been in the hands of the family since 1755, by the beginning of the 1920s it was owned by banks. In order to cover debts, the family had to mortgage it. Lena von Hindenburg, the widow of Hindenburg's brother, realized the situation she was in and put the property up for sale in the autumn of 1927. In 1925, 2 years earlier, Hindenburg had become president of Germany. As a war hero, respected of what it was widely considered to be his victory at not so far away Tannenberg, there were those who wanted to thank him. Of course, as we know from recent politics, buying a gift for a president is usually a highly profitable venture. On the occasion of the 80th birthday of Reich President Paul von Hindenburg in 1927, the conservative politician Ellard von Oldenburg-Januschau organized a fundraising campaign in which he called the Hindenburg Pfennig. The aim was to buy the Neudeck estate and give it to the Reich President as a gift from the German people. Thanks to some generous donations from industrialists, the campaign was successful. The chemical industrialist Karl Duisberg presented Paul von Hindenburg with the deed of ownership on the 2nd of October 1927. Over the next 2 years, Paul von Hindenburg had the manor house enlarged and expanded. Hindenburg stayed here when his personal presence in Berlin was not necessary, and many important meetings took place here, including those with Adolf Hitler once he was Chancellor. In the run-up to the National Socialist takeover of power, the biggest scandal in the country was not what Hitler's plans were, but a policy termed Osthilfe, Eastern Help. I cannot emphasize enough the importance that this scandal was to have in getting Hitler promoted to power by conservative elements who wanted to protect their income and indeed their corruption. With the Industrial Revolution and the growth of better opportunities in cities, people left the countryside. This happened everywhere. In Germany, this was particularly the case in East Prussia, which was the third largest province in Prussia, but the one with the lowest population. By the time the Nazis came to power, the population density was only half as dense as the Reich average. Despite grants and incentives, this province did not fully recover from the destruction caused by the invasion of the Russian army in August 1944 until the mid-1920s. To make matters worse, the Treaty of Versailles created Poland and cut the province off from the rest of the Reich by the Polish corridor. The eastern part of Germany was the main agricultural producer. Rural exodus and now the transport costs for necessary industrial products such as fuel, fertilizer, agricultural equipment, etc. rose dramatically. For many, food production ceased to be a profitable business. In 1926, the Prussian state government and the Reich government decided to offer credits to landowners. The General Border Aid was intended to make it easier for the estates in East Prussia, Pomerania, Brandenburg and Silesia to be able to restructure themselves and pay off their debts. Due to ever-increasing interest burdens, constantly declining profitability and the fall in the price of rye and potatoes from 1927 onwards, calls for support for East German agriculture became even louder. The East Prussia Law was passed on the 18th of May 1929 by the cabinet of Hermann Müller, who represented the centre-left SPD. This law intended to secure agriculture and food in the German Reich through loans, subsidies and state guarantees. In July 1930, by which time the global economic crisis had begun, the law was reinforced by an emergency decree. In total, by 1933, what was termed an impenetrable jungle of 61 laws, regulations, guidelines and 60 official decrees had emerged. These efforts were later summarized under the term Eastern Aid, Osthilfe. On the 31st of March 1931, the Brüning cabinet introduced a formal Eastern Aid Act to relieve agricultural enterprises of debt. This support was extended to all agricultural businesses to the east of the river Elbe. At the end of May 1931, this Eastern Aid Act was linked to the controversial project of settling new farmers on the land of bankrupt landowners. This earned Brüning the accusation of agrarian Bolshevism, and this led to his downfall. What the big landowners wanted was for the government to bail them out and not to give their land to farmers who would use it to produce food. Many of these landowners were absentee or did not manage their agricultural affairs in a business-like manner. However, for them to accuse smallholders who could work within the capitalist system and produce a livelihood, if not a profit, of being Bolshevik is patently absurd. If anything, it was the wealthy landowners who were being like Bolsheviks, as it was they who required the state to keep them in the style of living to which they were accustomed, at the price, of course, of the taxpayer. The Reich Commissioner for Eastern Aid was Hans Schlange-Schlöningen. His deputy Kurt Waxman played a key role in the development and design of Eastern Aid. It was clear to many in the system that there was room for abuse, and it was almost impossible for the administration to act fairly when granting subsidies. In June 1931, the first allegations of corruption were made in a confidential report that dealt with Hindenburg's interventions in agricultural aid. The Eastern Aid Commissioner of Pomerania, Johann Georg von Dewitz, provided quite generous support to his relatives and some of Hindenburg's relatives. In this context, it was suspected that Hindenburg and Brüning influenced the subsequent disciplinary proceedings. However, the facts of the case have still not been clearly clarified, and presumably never will be. Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff had been comrades in arms during World War I. It is they who were credited with their victories East Prussia in 1914 above all, even though they had just signed off the plan of General Hoffmann. However, after the war they had an argument and fell out. Erich Ludendorff was an important figure in the beer hall putsch of November 1923 and remained on the far right thereafter. On the 27th of November 1932, Erich Ludendorff launched a campaign in his magazine Volkswarte in which he drew attention to irregularities in the financing and collection for the Neudeck estate and accused Hindenburg of being influenced by certain circles. The Reich Chancellery and the Office of the Reich President only announced that the suspicions were groundless and that official denials had been deliberately avoided. Erlad von Oldenburg-Janoschau, Hindenburg's neighbour and friend, responded to the accusations with an open letter to the Kreuz Zeitung. This was then discussed in all major newspapers in the following days. The affair escalated into the Neudeck tax affair. Who actually paid for the gift tax? The Reichslandbund was a major lobby group formed in 1921 from two right-wing agricultural associations to represent large landowners, particularly those to the east of the Elbe River. The leadership pursued an anti-democratic nationalist course and rejected the Weimar Republic, while at the same time maintaining as much influence as possible under the existing system. Politically, it was close to the far-right DNVP, who represented it in their various national state parliaments and the Reichstag. It also started to support the Nazi Party once Hitler had a larger voice in parliament. Due to its position representing the wealthy landowners, it also had considerable influence on the press. Whereas the Reichslandbund had supported Hindenburg in 1925, in the 1932 elections it recommended voting for the German national Stahlhelm-Leaner Theodor Düsterberg, or indeed Adolf Hitler. And the reason for this was because Hindenburg refused to distance himself from giving his support to the SPD. On the 11th of January 1933, the RLB leadership had a meeting with Hindenburg in which the organization urged the sacking of Reich Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher, as he was not giving them enough cash and he was allowing the states of bankrupt landowners to be used by small-scale farmers. That very day, the Reich president in turn ordered Schleicher to provide more support for the landowners, but he refused. As a result, the Reichslandbund, the RLB, put out a press release which was so worded that it was just about a declaration of war against the government. Chancellor Schleicher and his cabinet rejected the RLB's accusations on the 12th of January 1933 and protested against the wording of the press release. The cabinet stopped all negotiations with the RLB. The Reich Association of German Industry published a statement expressing outrage at the RLB's actions. On the 13th of January 1933, the Reich Finance Minister Count Ferenc von Frosig reported to the Budget Committee on the financial situation of the states and municipalities. With the German National People's Party abstaining, the committee adopted a motion by the Centre Party to clarify which areas are refinanced and what amounts of money are flowed to large landowners on the one hand and to medium and small business on the other hand from Eastern aid, and the value of the funds granted in 1932 and what funds were to be made available in 1933. Elections over the previous years had not produced a reliable government in Germany, and effectively it was governed by presidential rule via the cabinet. In order to break the deadlock, business person and newspaper proprietor Alfred Hugenberg proposed that his party, the DNVP, enter into a coalition agreement. His only condition was that the Ministry of Economic Affairs and the Ministry of Food would be merged together under his control. One might think that, as he was not asking for anything too responsible, his request was moderate enough. Or was it? On the 19th of January 1933, the Centre Party MP Josef Ersing revealed details of the misuse of public funds from the Eastern Aid in the Reichstag's Budget Committee. If the money given by the Reich was not used to cover debts but to buy luxury cars and racehorses and for trips to Riviera, then the Reich would have to demand repayment of the money. The large landowners were trying to make further parliamentary negotiations impossible. That is why the strongest activity was being developed behind the scenes for an immediate dissolution of the Reichstag. The accusations aroused interest, not least because the names of Hindenburg and von Oldenburg-Janoschau had been mentioned in the press in connection with Ludendorff's revelations. These families were also said to receive preferential treatment in the allocation of public funds. It had also become known at the end of 1932 that Neudeck had been transferred to the president's son, Oskar von Hindenburg, in order to avoid inheritance tax. As far as I can tell, there was nothing illegal in the way that this was done, but it damaged Hindenburg's reputation as an honest and correct Prussian without fault or reproach, and increased interest in the new revelations. On the 21st of January 1933, the DNVP also announced open opposition to the government. It spoke of the danger of Bolshevism in the countryside, as it had done previously against Brüning. On 22nd of January 1933, Hitler, Wilhelm Frick, Hermann Göring, Paul Körner, Franz von Papen, Otto Meissner and Oskar von Hindenburg met at the home of Joachim von Ribbentrop. The discussion focused on the formation of a Hitler-Papen cabinet and the overthrow of the Schleicher cabinet. Hitler and Oskar von Hindenburg spoke for about 2 hours in private in the next room. Meissner later reported at Wilhelmstrasse trial that Hindenburg said on the way back in the taxi that there was now no other option than to make Hitler Chancellor. There is reasonable circumstantial evidence to suggest that Hitler threatened Hindenburg with further revelations. Moreover, Papen himself agreed to be Vice-Chancellor. The DNVP and Stahlheim had the majority in the cabinet, and further revelations could be prevented. On the 28th of January 1933, Schleicher announced to the press that he would ask Hindenburg for the authority to dissolve the Reichstag. If he refused, he would resign. At the same time, he warned of a Papen-Hugenberg dictatorship cabinet. At the cabinet meeting that morning, there were no significant objections from the ministers to Schleicher's plan. At midday, he met with Hindenburg. Hindenburg refused and dismissed Schleicher. Although Schleicher's resignation had been expected, the news was treated as a sensation in the press. Hindenburg appointed Hitler Chancellor on the 30th of January 1933. He formed a government made up of German nationalists and National Socialists, although the Nazis were in a minority. Hugenberg became Reich Minister for Economics and Food, and in this role also Commissioner for Aid to the East. The Berliner Tageblatt reported on the Eastern Aid scandal by officials of the Reich Commissariat for Eastern Aid on the morning of the 2nd of February 1933. 5 days later, the same newspaper republished an article about riots that prevented an investigation into the Eastern Aid scandal from continuing. Under the title The Eastern Aid Swamp, the Social Democratic newspaper Vorwärts reported on the 25th of February 1933 that the Berlin police chief had forbidden the SPD representative, Kurt Heinig, from publishing a brochure as a reporter for the investigative committee on the Eastern Aid scandal because of alleged threats to public order. The Reichstag fire decree allowed the Nazis to arrest members of the opposition. This in turn led to an unfree election which gave them and the DNVP a majority. This in turn led to the Enabling Act, which was passed in the Reichstag on the 23rd of March 1933. As a result, Hitler was able to shut down through the use of force and terror any complaints about Eastern Aid. The Investigative Committee on Eastern Aid completed its work on the 3rd of May 1933, and what a surprise! It found no irregularities in its final report. As for the RLB, it welcomed Hitler's appointment as Chancellor. In its weekly magazine, Ostland, issue 14, it wrote that with the unification of the leaders of the national movement, the spirit of August 1914 has been reawakened. The largest agricultural organization offered no resistance to the coordination of agriculture and its incorporation into the Reich food estate. In some ways, this could also be termed agrarian Bolshevism, but never mind. On the occasion of the celebrations of the anniversary for the Battle of Tannenberg on the 27th of August 1933, Hindenburg received a certificate from Göring, the Prime Minister of Prussia, in which the Langenau domain, previously owned by the Hindenburg family, and the Preußenwald forest near Gut Neudeck were given to Hindenburg as a gift. The then tenant of Langenau, Paul Gerhard Goetz, was forced by the National Socialist German Workers' Party to give up his lease, which should have run until 1948, as well as all livestock, which he had to give up without compensation, and it would seem without the knowledge of the Reich president. Both were then declared tax-free by Hitler and Göring, as long as they were in the possession of the male successors of the Hindenburg family. After all, Hindenburg's son, Oscar, had done so much to promote Hitler into power. The Reich also took over the cost of further expansion and the renovation of Gut Neudeck. Reich President Paul von Hindenburg died on the 2nd of August 1934. Hitler chose to merge the offices of Reich Chancellor and Reich President in the person of the Führer. The son of the President, Oskar von Hindenburg, advocated the merger. In a radio speech on the 18th of August 1934, he said, "My now deceased father himself saw Adolf Hitler as his immediate successor as head of the German Reich, and I am acting in accordance with my father's intention when I call on all German men and women to vote for the transfer of my father's office to the Führer and Reich Chancellor." And so his call still resounds from the Marshal's Tower in Tannenberg these days. Gather together and stand firmly behind Germany's Führer. Show both internally and externally that an unbreakable bond firmly encircles the German people in one will. Oskar von Hindenburg became the owner of the property on his father's death, though of course he'd owned it on paper since 1927. Only had 11 more years to enjoy it. In January 1945, the Red Army broke through into East Prussia and millions of German citizens attempted to escape the deluge. Margarita von Hindenburg, Oskar von Hindenburg's wife, successfully led a trek with 150 estate and village residents, including children previously evacuated from the west, fleeing the Red Army across the ice of the Vistula to Lower Saxony. The manor house was plundered and set on fire by Soviet soldiers. Neudeck was brought into Poland in the same year and was renamed Ogrodziniec. The ruins of the manor house, which had led to Hitler becoming Chancellor, were demolished around 1950. What you see here is what is left today. This, it could be said, is where corruption leads. I hope you found this interesting. I've done a number of videos relating to the rise of the Nazi Party, and indeed videos from the Second World War in Poland, the beginning of World War II, and all sorts of other things. My specialist area is the Holocaust. I upload videos every Tuesday and Friday at 2000 hours my time. I'm based in Poland and Germany, and I try to be present when videos are premiered. So that is your chance to interact with me and other viewers in real time. In order to know what will be uploaded, then I recommend subscribing. But for now, all the best from me in Gdansk, Poland.